So we already have the select HTML5 input control for use whenever we want to allow the end user to make a selection in a form. But what if we need a drop down of a different variety? A drop down, for example, that displays a menu. So I may have an item somewhere in the middle or the body of the page, not at the top, not the navigation area, the main navigation area. We're going to look at that in an upcoming lesson. But somewhere in the body, I may want to allow the user to make a choice that might navigate them someplace else or perform some action inside of the application I'm building. And if I want to do that, I would choose to create a Bootstrap dropdown. So dropdowns, as we'll see, they'll look like buttons, but they'll have a little drop-down arrow. They'll open up a menu with certain options, and we have some styling options there, but they can either be created from div tags or from button groups like we learned about when we looked at buttons. So in fact, it might not be obvious to you at first glance why you would choose perhaps the button group version of a dropdown versus a div tag version of the dropdown. And in fact, I'm not completely sure either outside of the styling options that you can add on for the button version. However, I'm willing to bet that there's more functionality coming that'll make it more obvious. After all, I'm still recording and looking at the alpha version. So this might be one of those videos that need to be updated. That's just my guess. But let's go ahead and talk about what you can do today, and then I'll let you decide which one's right for you as you begin working. So we're going to start by creating dropdowns using divs, and we'll come back using button groups in a little bit. So to begin, let's go ahead and create our new page, and we'll call this dropdowns.html. And then what I want to do is go to my template, and I made a change to the template just so you know. I was tired of stripping out all of the cells and then making additional rows. It seems like I've kind of settled into that pattern. So I've modified my template. If you want to pause the video and catch it with me and change your template too to look like this, then you would be prepared to follow along more closely with me from this point on. So now I'm going to paste in that new version of my template into my dropdowns.html, and I'm ready to roll. So let's start with the basic recipe you need in order to create a dropdown. And we'll start here in this first one. And here we're going to start with a div tag because we're going to use the div tag version of this. And so this is going to wrap all the other elements needed in order to create this component, this multifunctional component that has a lot of pieces to it. So next up, we need a button. And you might be thinking, but Bob, you said we're going to create the div tag version of this. That's true, but even the div tag version of this needs a button to trigger the dropdown. And so that's just something we got to do. So this is going to be what's actually displayed to the end user. And then we have another div tag that will be the menu that pops up underneath of the button when you click it. And then inside of that div tag, we're gonna create individual menu items, and we can do that either using anchor tags or we can use other buttons to create them. And I'll demonstrate both, but they work basically the same. Okay, so now let's fill in the classes required to make this come to life, because it's just not going to work on its own the way that it currently is. And so we're going to start by, at the topmost div, we're going to create a dropdown by using the dropdown class. And then inside the button, I'm going to go ahead and give it some text so you can see on the face of the button what the intent of this dropdown is for. Then I'm going to need to apply a class, and that class will be dropdown toggle here at the bottom. But I also need to apply button classes to it. So BTN, and then I can apply any other label like BTN secondary, for example, or primary, or whatever I choose. All right. Next up, let's go ahead and then start to define the menu itself. So here we go, class equals dropdown menu. And then each of the individual items, whether they're anchor tags or buttons, will need to be styled with the class equals dropdown menu item. Or dropdown item, rather. There we go. So let's call this first item. And we'll create a couple of those. And third. Great. All right, so now we should have most of a drop down, but there's one omission, and I'll show you if you ever run into this and it does not display your menu, you're missing one little piece of the puzzle. And this is a gotcha. You have to also, on the button, add a data star attribute, which, if you recall from our HTML5 course, data star attributes are add-ons, add-on attributes to elements. They can be defined by individual applications, or in this case, like a JavaScript library for a specific purpose. And in this case, we're going to create a data toggle attribute, and we're going to set it equal to dropdown. And so the Bootstrap.js that controls this feature, this dropdown feature, requires us to have the data-toggle equals on the button in order for it to then, in fact, toggle the menu below it. If we are missing it, then the JavaScript will never fire because the correct event will never be registered or fired off inside of our JavaScript handler. And there we go. Now we have it working. We have some hover, we can click, and then it can take action to navigate deeper into the application, perform some business logic inside of the user interface, whatever the case might be. That's up to us at that point. Okay, so now let's do this exact same version with a couple of variations to it below. And the first variation that I'm going to demonstrate is that we can show the dropdown in an open state. So immediately as the web page is loaded and the user is able to view it, the menu below the button will be displayed. So that's an option. You might want to control this using something else. You can also choose some a jQuery drop-down method to programmatically drop down your drop-down menus instead of using a specific button. And then here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add a button. I'm going to set its class equal to drop-down item, just like we did with the anchor tag, and then call this first item, and then we'll just paste that in a couple times. Whoops, second, and then third. And so at this point, this will look identical to the one previous to it, except that it's in an already open drop-down state. And I may want to then also style this differently, like as a BTN warning, and get any of those button styling options that are available to us. Okay, great. Let's talk about alignment. And so in this third case, and let me just make some copies of this row because I'm going to need some more space here to operate after this example. Great. All right, so next up, did you notice that whenever we ran the application, that the menu itself is aligned on the left edge of the button itself? If we were to push that over, let's just, for example, add some padding or actually some margin on the button itself. So let's go margin left 1 and then run this. You can see that it moves the button over. However, you'll notice that the menu itself is still aligned to its container, and the container is going to not be the drop-down boundaries, but rather to, in this case, our cell that we defined. All right. So just keep that in mind, because let me show you the so what to that. Let's add a second cell to that row. Class equals call xs 6. We'll do cell here, and I'm going to go text xs right. So I'm going to align the button to the right hand side of the cell. So let's just copy down our drop down one more time. Put it here. This is a weird behavior. I'm going to get rid of the open. And I've changed nothing else about this. I'll go ahead and remove the margin on the left, though. We just don't need it. And then run it. Okay, so now we have our drop down on the right hand side, but when I open the drop down, notice that even though I've said I want everything right aligned, the menu itself is still going to align itself to the left and will float underneath the block for the actual button itself. So to remedy this, what we can do is add another option to our drop-down menu class, and that is drop-down menu right. And now when we run the application, the drop-down will be aligned to the right-hand side. Notice that the individual items, however, their text is aligned to the left. So if we want to right align those, we'll have to use text XS or whatever size right on each one. Let's go ahead and run that again just on the first one just so we can see it. And there we go. We get the desired effect there. Okay. So just be aware that there are some interesting options with regards to where the actual menu is displayed. We'll look at another version of this in just a few moments where we can, instead of dropping it down, we can drop it up above the button itself. We'll come back to that. All right. So now, in addition to what we've already done here with moving it to the right, let's add some other options. Like, for example, I want to add a header to the dropdown. So I can do something like add a h6 class equals dropdown header. All right. And so this is my header text here. And then I can add a divider in between each of the items by adding a div class equals and then dropdown divider, like so, with no text in between. So let's take a look at what that's added for us. All right, so we can see there's header text not selectable, and then a divider between the second and third items. Okay. We can also disable a particular menu option. Let's take this, let's actually copy the button and make a fourth item. And then I'm going to add the disabled class to it. And now it's grayed out, cannot be selected. Get the little icon feedback. Nice. All right. And that pretty much wraps up everything I want to do with the div tag version of this. But remember, there's also a button group version. And if you recall, the way that we create a button group is to start off with a div, and then we have to give it a specific class. So class equals btn group. All right. And then we want to use a button. And then we're going to have a div class. And that div will have a class equals drop-down menu. And at this point, you're thinking, oh, okay, well then what you're saying, Bob, is that a button group can be identical to a drop-down. The only difference is that you're starting off with a different class, and that seems to be accurate, okay? Everything else seems to be the same. For example, you even get this btn, let's go btn secondary, and let's go drop down toggle, like so. We'll have to come back to that in a moment. We'll call this drop down. And then in here, again, we get the options for the anchor tags or whatever we have available to us, or whatever we choose to use rather, for individual class equals drop down items. And then item 1, and we'll just copy that a couple times. Go 2 and 3. And this will operate identically, because if we attempt to now use our newest dropdown, it still doesn't work. Why? Because we didn't have that data star data dash toggle attribute set to dropdown. Now, when we run this, and we close up the one above it, now it works. Okay, so again, the only real difference, it seems like, between the button group based version and the dropdown based version is just the class, but everything else seems to work exactly the same. So I'm a little confused about that, quite honestly, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. Now, the one cool thing that you can do with the button version is create what are called split button dropdowns. So I'm just going to paste in an example that they have in their documentation here into another row. And let's take a look at that. All right, and so you see you get the split where there's the actual button itself versus the drop down itself, and it has a visual separation. So you get that with a split, and I actually like the split. I think it's a cool look. Now let's go back to the beginning here and grab our the very first version of this to put some options on this as well. Here I want to show that you can go BTN large, or you can go we'll go right next to it, BTN small. And then the final thing that I want to show is, and we'll come here and we'll do this with this button group that we defined ourselves. Grab that one. And the last thing I'll demonstrate is that we can go drop button group space drop up and get a different version of this. So you can see large version, small version, and then finally the drop up. All right, so a lot of cool options here, and you know, I like these. I think it does make a nice little compact menu inline inside of your pages, and so I'll probably use this quite a bit in my applications. All right, so continuing on, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.